A legal hearing into the war in Gaza is set to start in a few minutes in The Hague in the Netherlands. South Africa will be asking the International Court of Justice to order an immediate halt to the Israeli offensive in Rafah as part of a case accusing Tel Aviv of committing genocide in the territory. Earlier this year, the ICJ passed a ruling demanding that Israel take action to limit deaths arising from its military offensive. But judges stopped short then of ordering a ceasefire.
We are also particularly mindful.
And for more, Alex Cadier joins us live from Paris. Alex, this hearing does it differ from the one in January, from which, as we just heard, yielded that ruling, which was a disappointment for South Africa and other countries that had wanted a full and immediate ceasefire?
Well, certainly this is different because it is a much more specific hearing. It is specifically looking at the Israeli military operation in Rafah, and that will be the big question put forward by South Africa in their argument in the next 45 minutes or so. South Africa at the Peace Palace, the International Court of Justice here in The Hague, will be trying to show that the operation in Rafah creates conditions in Gaza which makes sustaining human life impossible and therefore, constitutes a breach of the Genocide Convention. That will be the argument put forward by South Africa. We know that other countries, most notably Egypt, have lent their voice to this broader case brought by Pretoria to the ICJ. But this hearing will just be about Rafah, whether or not it constitutes a breach of international law and the Genocide Convention. So that will be the focus, whether or not the Israeli operations allows enough humanitarian aid to flow in, and what the answer is to the big question that has always loomed over this operation: can they evacuate civilians? And if so, where can those civilians go? So that will be the focus for South Africa. It's a much more specific, narrow scope for the court to look at. Something that is quite interesting. We've heard frustrations from the Israeli side at the speed at which they've had to prepare their defense. These hearings were announced on Tuesday afternoon. The Israelis will be presenting their case tomorrow, Friday morning. So that is a really short time frame for them to do so. Nevertheless, they have sent a team on their way to The Hague to defend Israel.
Apart from that legal defense, Israeli Prime Minister, in fact, he has been adamant, despite pressure from close partner Washington, that they will go ahead with that Rafah offensive. What's the best that South Africa can expect from this hearing, given that determination from Israel?
Well, actually, that rift between Washington and the Israeli government is really important here as well, because it could affect what the consequences might look like. That walk you through that legal process. If the court rules in favor of South Africa and shares South Africa's perspective that the operation in Rafah could constitute a breach of international law and the Genocide Convention, and then orders Israel to cease all military operations in Rafah, that would be seen as a win for South Africa. There's no question about it. The following step is about enforcement. These orders are legally binding but can only be enforced by the UN Security Council, which means you need a resolution, which means you need a US abstention or a vote in favor. So any enforcement so far will have been blocked by the United States. But because this is so specific to the Rafah operation, something Washington and the Israeli government do not agree on, there is a possibility, maybe, that the US position might shift, which would allow even more pressure to be piled onto Israel. It may not make a change in the next few hours, in the next few days, maybe not in the next few weeks, but certainly it continues to ramp up that pressure on Israel and highlight that international opposition to the operation in Rafah.
Thanks to Alex Cadier. They're reporting live to us from Paris.